lie, I do not actually have the capacity to hide all of these off screen. There does not exist enough desk in the world. Yeah, that's it. That's the intro. It's a big old pile of books, innit? I think I nailed that. And welcome back to a new video. On today's edition of What the Devil Is She Doing Now, we shall be adding some books to our collection and also to my challenge, because if you didn't see the launch of my brand new TBR game, one of my challenges on this here a beautiful bingo board is to and as you will also have seen from the thumbnail, there are 4 stacks of books here. Now technically only 2 of these stacks of books I actually purchased myself. The other 2 are made up entirely of birthday gifts and of books from publishers, which kind of explains how we have ended up here once again in book hauling territory so soon after my last haul, which was the haul to end all hauls. Guess she's back. Back again, and she's sad. Tell a friend. I am quite intimidated by these stacks and I do not entirely know where to start. So I will just be starting with some of the books that don't count to, you know, ease me into the concept of doing the numbers for all of this at the end. Strong suspicion that this percentage is about to plummet very soon. First up, we're starting off strong with a creepy horror, which doesn't seem entirely in keeping with the idea of being a rainbow enthusiast, but rainbows only appear after the darkness, and this book is definitely serving us darkness. This is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira, otherwise known as Shauna Maguire, the person who of course wrote the Wayward Children series. Weirdly, I actually haven't read much of Shauna Maguire's other works outside of the Wayward Children series, despite the fact that I own quite a few of them on my shelf. This book was a gift from the wonderful Steph from Novelty Corner, who I love very much. She picked this one off of my wish list for me because back in the day when myself and my lovely friend Kirsty, who is of course my co-host for Around the Disc in 800 Days, used to have a podcast called Death by the Books, in which we talk about books in which people die. And this was one of the books that we talked about on that podcast, and so Steph's note says that I'm pretty sure you and Kirsty are responsible for me reading this book, so it seems right that I should get it as a gift for you. I do not actually have a physical copy of this book, so I'm very glad that this is now in my collection. This is about the crew of a ship who are brought together to investigate the mystery of a film crew who went missing at sea. This crew were filming a mockumentary in the Mariana Trench, which is a very famous part of the Pacific Ocean, and they were bringing like legendary sea creatures to life. But then the ship and all hands went missing, leaving behind absolutely no clue of what kind of misadventure they had run up against. And now this crew, 7 years later, have been hired to go and investigate the mystery. I do not think that it's any spoiler to tell you guys that this book is commonly known as the Creepy Mermaid book, because it does indeed have a creepy mermaid rather abstractly on the cover, and it does very much what it says on the tin. Next up, I have 2 books, the origin of which are a complete mystery to me because there was no name on the gift note. So if you are the lovely person who sent these books to me, then please let me know down in the comment section so I can thank you properly. And the first of these books is yet another horror, and when I say that I squealed when I opened this package, this is Horror Hotel by Victoria Fulton and Faith McClaren, and it is about the Ghost Gang, who are a bunch of teenagers who have a YouTube channel in which they go and investigate famous hauntings. None of it has ever been particularly spooky before, most of it is just to satisfy their YouTube audience, but that all changes when they go to the infamous LA Horror Hotel. This hotel has had a lot of really horrible, really gruesome things happen within its walls, and they spend the night there thinking it's just going to be like every other one of their haunts. But then they open up the door to one of the rooms and they find something entirely unexpected. I watch way too many ghost hunting YouTubers. It's like this book was written specifically for me. And the second one in that mystery package was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This is a romance which pretty much everybody is talking about right now, and I'm not sure entirely what in the contents of it make it so unique that it's caught so many people's imaginations, but I'm gonna find out. This one is about Naomi. She turns up in a little town called Knockmount, Virginia, trying desperately to do the right thing. She has sped to this little town in the middle of nowhere to help her twin Tina, who promises upon promise that this time she has changed her life. But when Naomi gets there and hands over a bunch of money and aid to Tina, she is not entirely surprised to discover that the next morning Tina is nowhere to be found, that she has taken off once again with Naomi's money. But she is somewhat surprised to discover that she has been left with an 11-year-old niece that she didn't know existed. Now stranded in this town with a kid that she doesn't know, she is in desperate need of help. Enter Barber Knox and his basset hound Waylon. They live in this little town in Virginia specifically because they don't like people and they don't want to get involved in any drama. But unfortunately the drama lands on their doorstep and they don't really have much say in whether they help or not. And then the last one from my birthday was a gift from my lovely friend Amy over Amy Talks Books on Bookstagram, and she got me this absolutely beautiful edition of Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. Just look at this foiling, it is absolutely stunning. But are you ready for it? Are you ready for it? Look at those sprayed edges. And the sprayed edges go into the end papers and it just, oh, and if you do like special editions with, you know, like sprayed edges and stuff, you definitely want to watch the rest of this haul because that's what this entire middle column is. Just a tiny little spoiler there. And once again, this one is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is a Greek myth retelling, of course, about Clytemnestra. I love the little bit of the top of the blurb. In this one it says, as for queens, they are either hated or forgotten. She already knows which option suits her best. This one is essentially pitched as a revenge tale, which I am absolutely loving as a new genre of Greek myth retelling, which has emerged in the last couple of years. Of course, giving the heroines of Greek myth more of a voice than they have ever had, and generally that voice is an angry one. Okay, so next up I've got two books I'm going to show you together, but only one of them is actually a new purchase. It's just that I want you to be able to experience the covers side by side, because it was an iconic moment when I lined the two up. This one is, of course, The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, which was originally pitched as a standalone fantasy featuring lots of sapphic, wonderful warrior queens and dragons. But Samantha Shannon, being the person that she is, could not leave it at just one book, and so now we have a prequel. This prequel is called A Day of Fallen Night, and it follows the ancestors of the people in Priory of the Orange Tree, and it asks a lot of questions really about how our myths are shaped, about how we value some historical figures over other historical figures, and how we silence women in the past, all while also providing us a ton of other amazing things, like two sapphic women in their 50s who are main characters, women who are born only to be mothers who do not want to be mothers, and you know, dragons and swords and big battles. These two look absolutely stunning together. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Samantha Shannon's book tour for A Day of Fallen Night and meet her in person. Footage of that coming in my next vlog, but I had already picked up the Waterstones edition of this one, so I've got a shiny gold signature and then a lovely personalised one on the next page. So these books are doubly precious to me, and I will be super annoyed if anything happens to this while I am reading it, because they are bricks and they are not easy or comfortable to read in hardback format, which is why my reread of Priory this year is going to be done in a paperback, which I can destroy. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run through another couple of sequels that I have got in my stack here and get them out of the way. The first one that I have got is 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson. This is the 5th book in the Truly Devious series. For those of you who haven't heard me absolutely rave about this series before, I usually pitch it as perfect for people who are fans of true crime podcasts, the book Sadie, and the trilogy A Good Girl's Guide for Murder, because it encompasses all of my favourite elements from all of the above and then does something completely different with it. The first 4 books in the Truly Devious series kind of complete their own little arc, and they follow Stevie Bell as she is admitted to the prestigious Ellingham Academy. Ellingham Academy believes in fostering the interests and obsessions of the pupils that it admits through its door, and Stevie gets in on the back of an essay about the Ellingham Academy murders. captors. Because back in the 20s, the founder of Ellingham Academy's wife and daughter were taken for ransom and were never returned. Their bodies have never been found and their stories have never been told. And Stevie wants to tell those stories. She wants that to be the project that gets her through Ellingham Academy. But when Stevie gets to Ellingham Academy, a mysterious note appears signed Truly Devious, which is the same name that was signed on the original ransom note all those years ago, and Stevie has to wonder if she has made a massive mistake by opening this can of worms again. I absolutely love this series and the characters in it, and this 5th book starts another arc which is happening somewhere away from Ellingham Academy for the first time, which leaves me with a few question marks about whether I'm going to like it quite as much, but I am determined to give it a try, because I am nothing if not trying. And the other sequel that I have is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams, which is the 2nd book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. This was sent to me from the publishers, who know that I not only love this series, but I also love Chris Riddell, who has started to illustrate all of the books in this series. The first one came out last year, I think, on the 42nd anniversary of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and honestly, Chris Riddell just does not disappoint. For me, his illustrations bring books to life in a way that I would never have imagined them myself. And almost every second page has either a character illustration or a full page spread, and then obviously there are these amazing back and front end papers, and I don't know, it's very, very sexy. I don't think I really need to give anybody a synopsis for the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, except that it's about a grumpy man who realises that his home is about to be destroyed and that he has no choice but to go elsewhere. I think that's vague enough that I didn't include any spoilers. I think I'll just keep going down this little pile of books from publishers, seeing as you could see a couple of spoilers on the top of that stack. And the next one I have is A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating by Sarah Hawley. This is about a witch called Mariel. She is supposed to be the strongest witch in her generation, but she's just a bit crap at it, really. Her spells never entirely do what she thinks they're going to do, and she's much happier baking bread than, you know, sorting out other people's problems. But then in true Mario fashion, one day she does a spell which accidentally summons a demon. The problem is that she can't just unsummon this demon, because when he turns up he only leaves once he has got a soul to take with him, which is the ultimate there is only one bed available, because Ozroth literally cannot leave Mariel's side. I am a tiny bit worried about this one, because I have found over the last couple of months that sort of cozy fantasy romance with witchy elements, while on the surface initially works for me. What I really want is more of the plot and far less of the romance, but I am dedicated to giving this one a go. The next book in my stack is a very highly anticipated release for a lot of people, and I'm very lucky to have been given a proof of it, and that is In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune. This one is being marketed as a queer Pinocchio retelling, which I didn't think were words that I would ever say on this channel, because Pinocchio is one of my least favourite fairy tales in the entire world, and the Disney movie gave me night terrors as a child and can get in the bin. However, the back of this book is giving me more Bicentennial Man and less Pinocchio, so I'm quite happy about that. And I just want to read you the very start of this blurb because it absolutely enchanted me. It says, "In a strange little home built in a peculiar forest lives a human named Victor and 3 robots. A pleasantly sadistic nurse machine, a small vacuum desperate for love and attention, and a fatherly inventor android named Giovanni Lawson. Together they're a family, hidden and safe." This little found family is perfectly happy together until one day Vic salvages up a part and activates a beacon that he did not mean to activate. And this beacon brings people into their forest, people who want to capture Geo and to take him back where he came from, and potentially to disassemble him forever. I'm pretty sure at this point that I would lie in front of a train for Geo, and I haven't read the book yet, so I'm anticipating this one being a win. Now let's reward your patience by dipping into some of the special editions that I promised, and the first one that I've got is a YA fantasy romance, which is generally not a collection of words that you hear very often on my channel, but occasionally there is one that catches my eye, and this was definitely one of those occasions. This is The Buried and the Bound by Rochelle Hassan, and it is absolutely stunning. This is the will create exclusive cover for this, and it is essentially a cottagecore fantasy come to life. I think the end papers in this one are particularly stunning to me. They're just kind of giving off all of the perfect for Leanne vibes, and the book itself is not only beautifully foiled, but the back foil on it is the Bridge Bishop Memorial Library. Like, it's a logo and an advert for this place that exists in the book, which makes me really happy. Now, this one has one of those synopses that's essentially like reading a mini novel in and of itself. This book obviously has a lot of moving parts and it is determined to tell you about absolutely every one of them. So I'm going to do my best to just read you a little bit and cherry pick you out the information that I think you will need without also making it more complicated than it needs to be. Are you listening, publishers? Blurbs don't need to be this complicated, honestly. So this one says, as the only hedge witch in Blackthorn, Massachusetts, an uncommonly magical place, Aziza El-Amin has bargained with wood nymphs, rescued palm-sized fairies from house cats, and banished flesh-eating shadows from the local park. When a dark entity awakens in the forest outside of town, eroding the boundary between the human world and fairyland, run-of-the-mill fey mischief turns into outright aggression, and the danger to herself and others becomes too great for Aziza to handle alone. And then the blurb essentially goes on to say that the love interest in this one is the guy that she recruits to help her. Now again, for me right now, the love interest part of fantasy romance is kind of like, whatever. But the world that this book evokes with just that little bit of the synopsis makes me so excited. So I am crossing my fingers that the characters in the background are meaty enough that I will like the romance as well. As the eagle-eyed amongst you may have ascertained from that brief flash of sprayed edges there, the next book on my stack is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty, otherwise known as S.A. Chakraborty, the author of the Daevabad series. This one is not a book that I am going to struggle to make myself pick up for my Read 80% of my purchases from 2023 challenge, because this one is one of my most anticipated releases from this year. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'll pop it up here and down below in the description, because there are still tons and tons of books on it which have not come out yet. This one is about Amina al-Sirafi, who is a fairly famous pirate. Maybe not as famous as she would like to be, but definitely famous enough that she's made herself a fairly good reputation. The thing is, Amina al-Sirafi is now retired. She is of middle age, she has settled down, she has had a family, she has a very comfortable life. But then one day a mysterious woman turns up on her front doorstep, claiming to be the mother of one of Amina's old crewmates. She says that Amina's crewmate has been kidnapped, and she is offering Amina a huge sum of money to go and get him back. Now, while Amina is not exactly badly off in this life that she has set up for herself, she could always do with more cashola, because it will set up not just her children, but her children's children's children. And also, it's the kind of task that people write songs about. It's the kind of task that will make her a legend amongst legends, if she can, you know, do it without dying. This one is the exclusive Waterstones edition of this one. It has red sprayed edges and it has these beautiful end papers, and it has a beautiful signature from the author inside. Expect to see this one on a TBR very stinking soon. Let's now do a special edition for a different genre. Lots of my special editions are fantasy or fantasy adjacent, but this one is very much not. This one is a YA thriller, and when I tell you that when I knew this edition existed, I could not get it out of my brain until I had hunted down a copy. I do not exaggerate. I drove a fair distance to pick up a copy of this. This is another Waterstones exclusive edition, and at the time that I picked it up there were only 2 available in all of Scotland in any of the shops. So I'm very glad that I decided I needed it when I did, because if I had discovered it later on I would have been real mad. And that book is 5 Survive by Hawley Jackson. I mentioned one of Hawley Jackson's books earlier on in this video. Remember when I said about Good Girl's Guide to Murder? Well, this is she, and I am very pumped for this book. But first off, before I tell you what it's about, let me just briefly show you why it is so spectacular. I just wait. It's just so fluorescent. This book just makes me so happy. It's also signed, which in this case is just kind of a bonus. But look, it also has a map. So this one is about Red Kenny and her friends who are on a road trip before spring break. They are all crammed into one not necessarily perfectly in repair RV, and there are plenty of complications amongst the 6 people who are in that RV. Romantically, familially, friendshiply. It's not the most perfect mix. But then suddenly in the middle of the night, mid-drive, one of the tyres explodes and they end up stranded at the side of the road. Which is when a bullet enters the RV and they realise that that tyre didn't just blow itself. Because there is in fact a sniper outside and he is determined to make them come out where he can play with them. And so that now makes the weird map of the RV make far more sense. At the time that this one came across my radar, a couple of friends were also reading it and they were completely obsessed with it. As in, like, picked it up one morning, read it through all in the one day because they had to know what happened. So yeah, I'm holding out all of the hopes. I love Hawley Jackson and I really hope that she can pull this one off for me. And now let's look at a backlist title which I have picked up, because this haul is very heavy with new releases, which is quite unusual for my hauls. Usually they are split nicely half and half between new releases and things that I had just never heard about or that had always been on my radar and I was finally convinced to pick up. And that is definitely the case for this one. This is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, and this one is a Dracula retelling. And to be fair, this is a fairly famous Dracula retelling. This one came out in 2005 and I swear I've seen it at least once a year since then, and almost every time I have mentioned Dracula on my channel, somebody has recommended this book to me. And do you see this? Do you see how much this book is leaning? Look how floppy this book is. It was worth buying just for that, let's be honest. But the reason that I have never picked this book up, despite the fact that so many people have recommended it to me and so many people have said that it very much carries the eerie stillness that Dracula has on into this book, is that I still don't really entirely know what it's about, because it has a very, very short blurb and pretty much anywhere you go it's just a very, very short blurb, which very much says to me that the publishers have realised that telling anybody any other concrete details about this book are probably going to be classed as a spoiler, but which does make it slightly more complicated for me wanting to pick it up, because the only reason that this book slipped through my purchasing net this year and not in any of the previous years was that I was out book shopping with Amy and our friend Jill, and she just slipped this on top of my stack and went, "This is the most you book that has ever used," and I absolutely adored it. Plus Jill is almost never wrong about things that I will enjoy, so that's helpful. The blurb says, "Late one night, exploring her father's library, a young woman finds an ancient book and a cache of yellowing letters, addressed ominously to 'my dear and unfortunate successor.' Her discovery plunges her into a world she never dreamed of, a labyrinth where the secrets of her father's past and her mother's mysterious fate connect to an evil hidden in the depths of history," which I assume is where Dracula comes in. So that was a backlist horror. Let's talk about a brand new horror. This book is The Shadow Glass by Josh Winning, and it wins the awards for perhaps the most batshit crazy cover and synopsis that I have ever read. I mean, it's a puppet fox with a machine gun. Let me explain the attraction. This book is about Jack. His father has recently passed away, and it means that Jack has had to return home. Jack absolutely hates his childhood home. It has become completely claustrophobic and overwhelming to him because it is filled from floor to ceiling with movie memorabilia. And that is because his dad was not only a movie buff but also a movie producer, and he very famously wrote and directed and produced a film called The Shadow Glass, which massively flopped. So now Jack finds himself with the unenviable task of trying to sort through this collection, sell things, donate things, clean stuff out, when all of a sudden, one day, one of the puppets in the attic starts talking to him. And then apparently so starts a quest to try and save London and possibly the rest of the world, because it turns out that Jack's dad hadn't really written a film called The Shadow Glass about make-believe puppets. He had in fact made a film called The Shadow Glass about a real place. I kind of would describe the synopsis of this book as being for anybody who was deeply, deeply traumatised by the puppet episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a young person, and I count myself amongst that very, very large number. Do you know what? I've actually got another 2 books in this stack in which romances feature as some sort of key component of the book. And I don't know how this turned into such a romance heavy haul, because I promise you it's really just not usually my thing. But all of these books have another angle in them somewhere that has just suckered me in. So I may as well show you another one of them, especially because this one is very, very pretty. This book is The Thorns Remain by J.J.A. Harwood, and y'all are not ready. You could not prepare yourself. Look at those sprayed edges. One of my favourite things about sprayed edges is actually when they match up with the cover and it looks like a wraparound thing. Like I think that's really, really special. But this book also has stunning end papers and some beautiful foiling under the dust jacket. The book is the first in a new book subscription box service called the Locked Library. This is a book only subscription box, and it's a little bit different from things like FairyLoo or Owlcrate or Illumicrate. Each of those subscription box services curate from a range of different publishers, and they pick the titles that they think that people are going to particularly love. And the difference with this one is that this is a subscription box service coming from HarperCollins direct, so the publisher themselves are curating the books that go into this, and therefore they're putting in what they think are going to be their biggest releases of the year. So this subscription box was marketed as fantasy and science fiction, and it's going to have both adult and YA books in it. However, I do have the second month of this subscription here to show you in a minute, and it's actually a myth retelling, so I wouldn't technically call that fantasy. For me, myth retellings sit in their own little category, and so I was kind of surprised to see it in a fantasy box, particularly when this book was the first book to kick off that book subscription service. As I say, I'm not a rep, I paid for these with my own money, but if you are considering getting this subscription, that's maybe something that would sway your opinion one way or the other. So that's just a little bit of extra information for you, I guess. But in saying all of that, I am super glad that I have picked this one up, because it is set in 1919 in the Highlands of Scotland. This begins in a tiny little Highland village where one group of young people are determined that they're going to have one last night of celebrations and revelry together before what's left of the youth in this village, who are left after a flu pandemic and after the war, are going to move south to try and start better lives for themselves. And so they decide that they're going to have a midnight bonfire in what I can only assume is going to be a few beverages in the woods in the dark. But as they are tipsily dancing, figures start to make themselves known in the trees, and these young people have unknowingly summoned the Fae. But the fair folk of the north of Scotland are not gentle or kind, and soon these young people will find themselves having to settle a bargain. Go on, admit it, it sounds great, doesn't it? You can see why I'm willing to overlook the romance part. Next up, I have got a horror that has been on my radar pretty much since I spotted it for the first time in 2020, but I've just continued to walk by it and be like, maybe next time. Turns out next time was this time. This one is The Boatman's Daughter by Andy Davidson, and it is kind of giving me Daughter of Smoke and Bone vibes. So this one is about Miranda Crabtree. When she was a very young child, her father died and she was left pretty much destitute, and she was taken in by a very odd person. Now, all these years later, Miranda literally is the boatman's daughter. She ferries contraband up and down the bayou to the demands of an old witch and a mad preacher and his declining band of followers. In her world, what pays is to keep your secrets and keep your head down, especially when what you are protecting is a very special child. But as supernatural things start to heat up in the bayou, Miranda is asked by the preacher to undertake a journey longer than she has ever done before, and she knows that it is the only thing that possibly stands between her loved ones and certain death. I really love the way that this is described at the bottom of the blurb. It says that it is a gorgeous, horrifying novel, a journey into the dark corners of human nature, drawing our worst fears and temptations into the light. I think that I'm gonna have to steal a gorgeous, horrifying journey is the title of my autobiography. Next up, I have a book that I've never heard anybody talk about before. It was a complete random find for me, and it's really difficult to categorise exactly what's going on in it. At the start of the blurb, it sounded kind of mystery thrillery, and then by the end of it, I was like, wait, have we got supernatural elements going on in this? Is this actually horror? And I still don't entirely know, but I don't think I want anybody to tell me either. I think I want to go into it kind of just blind. This is The Dark Between Trees by Fiona Barnett, and it is about Dr. Alice Christopher, who in our present day is starting an expedition into a place called Moresby Woods. Alice is a historian who is devoted her entire life to these strange woods and all of the weird legends that have popped up and all of the strange mysteries and disappearances that have happened over the time that it has existed. But the biggest mystery about Moresby Wood is that in 1643 a group of parliamentarian soldiers were completely ambushed, taken off guard, and had to flee their position, and the only place that they could go to take any kind of cover was Moresby Wood. But as soon as they entered the threshold of the wood, they disappeared, never to be heard from again. Now, all of these years later, armed with a grant, a team, and with GPS and metal detecting technology and a bunch of other stuff, this expedition is going to head into the woods to once and for all uncover this mystery. Also, this motif on the cover of like the stag's antlers with the eye underneath it carries on to the end papers. It's really creepy. It's really hard to pin down exactly what genre this book sits in, but when I read it, I will definitely let you know. Okay, we're nearly at the bottom of this stack, so let's look at the second last of our special editions. This one is Wayward by Amelia Hart. Now, this is another book that was on my most anticipated of 2023 list, but I did talk a little bit of smack about this cover because the cover for the US version looks like this, and I gotta say, I vastly prefer it. No shade to butterflies, because there is actually an entomologist in this novel who obviously studies insects. It does make sense, but doesn't this cover just elicit something a little bit different in you? I want to read the book that belongs to this cover more than I want to read the book that belongs to this cover, you know? However, in saying that, despite the fact that it's not my favourite cover in the world, bam! It's got those matching end papers which make like a full wraparound cover, and I am a sucker for those. And not gonna lie, in person this book is actually rather beautiful all on its own. So I'm glad that I have it. I'm just a little bit less glad than I would have been had it, you know, been the other cover. So yeah, as I said, Wayward was one of my most anticipated for 2023. It is a witchy historical story which follows 3 different women from the same family in 3 different time periods. So first of all, we've got Kate from 2019. She has run away from London and her life and everybody who actually knows her in any kind of concrete way, and she is determined that she is never going back, but the only place that she has to run away to is Wayward Cottage in Cumbria, which is a little cottage that has been handed down in their family. There she discovers the diaries and the paperwork of Violet, who lived in the house in 1942. She was an entomologist. She was only interested in bugs, but then a choice is made for Violet and a series of events is set into motion which affects both Kate and the future, and has sort of its roots in the past of Wayward Cottage from before Violet was even there. Because before Violet lived in the cottage, there was Altha, who lived in the cottage in 1619, and Altha was accused of witchcraft. And now, my friends, you see all of the reasons why I'm interested in this book. It is a book about 3 different women at 3 different ages in their lives and at 3 different ages of the world, but all revolving around the one cottage, which in itself sounds like it has a personality. And you know that I love place as character, and you know that I love narratives which take place through different parts of time. So I'm really hoping that this one is as good as I hope that it's going to be. Lots and lots of people who like the kind of books that I like are also very excited for it, so I'm sure sure I'm gonna see some opinions real soon. Alright, so second last book in this haul before the light completely abandons me is the second book from the Locked Library subscription box that I was talking about earlier. This one is The Valkyrie by Kate Hartfield. Again, it is an absolutely stunning edition. There's something about all of that beautiful foiling on the white book that just does it for me. It also has the stenciled edges, and then there's all of this lovely foiling under the dust jacket. Oh, and the one thing that I forgot to mention about the other book from the Locked Library subscription is that all of them have these tipped in letters from the author printed on the inside, which I think is really, really nice, because I hate it when you get letters from the author and they're just like a piece of really thick laminated card, and it's like, what am I doing with this? I don't want to shove it in my book, I'm just going to lose it. So having them actually printed in the book for me is a treat. So as I've said, this one is a retelling of some Norse mythology. I don't really know very much about Norse mythology. That's not the area of mythology that I've ever been interested in, and so I go in as blind as you to this one with only the synopsis to go on. The back of the book has a quote and it says, "It was a place for believing in gods and monsters, but what made me shiver was that everyone was a god and a monster." And to be fair, that's exactly the kind of retelling that I like. So the blurb for this one says, "Brunhild is a Valkyrie, shield maiden of the Allfather, chooser of the slain. But now she too has fallen, flightless in her exile. Gudrun is a princess of Burgundy, a daughter of the Rhine, a prize for an invading king, a king whose brother Attila has other plans, and a dragon to call upon. And in the songs to be sung there is another hero, Sigurd, a warrior with a sword sharper than the new moon. As the legends tell, some are destined to be lovers, some fated as enemies. But here on Midgard, legends can be lies. For not all heroes are heroic, nor all monsters monstrous, and a shield maiden may yet find that love is the greatest weapon of all." This one is another one that I wouldn't necessarily have chosen for myself, and of course all of the picks for the Locked Library are technically mysteries for the month, so you don't really get to know very much in advance what books are coming out, although I do believe they are like trialling some way to skip a book if it's not something that you're interested in. So for now, I guess I'm trialling this subscription service. Maybe I will read a couple of these books back to back in a vlog and see whether they actually work for me or not. But regardless of how much I love it, I think this is a genuinely stunning book, so maybe if the two titles that you've seen so far are something that you like, this would be a subscription for you. So there you go guys, those are all of the books that I have to show to you today. I'm now going to have to put all of them on my acquisition spreadsheet for the year and do some maths to work out exactly what my percentage of read books will look like now. I suspect it will have gone down somewhat significantly. Oh dear, we may have made a mistake. But what can you say? Your girl had a birthday, and then birthday money, and some other books were just, they were homeless and they needed somebody to take them home, and that person had to be me for unknown reasons that don't need to be explained. If you have got all the way through this video, then please leave me the waves emoji to celebrate the wonder that is the adventures of Amina al-Sirafi. If you have any recommendations based on the books that I have picked up here today that I am excited for, then please do tell me that down below. I am nothing if not here to cry about the length of my wish list. If you are new to my channel and you would like to hear my opinions on any of these books in the future, then please hit that subscribe button down below so that can be pinged directly into your subscription feed. And if you have enjoyed this video, then please hit that thumbs up, because it really does help my channel. And I will speak to all of you soon guys. Bye!